guys, it's me, Nina, and I'm here with my March wrap-up, and this one's gonna be a good one. So during the whole COVID-19 thing, we're all trapped in our house with nothing to do, and I have gone on 2 missions. I have been challenging myself to read 100 pages a day, which is how I read so many books, and I've been exercising every day, so trying to work on myself and be productive in my own life and, you know, reach my goals. So I'm really excited for this wrap-up, so let's just get into it. So the first 3 I'm going to show you is a series. I read the entire series this month. I don't know what the series is called. Altered, I guess. Here it is in order. Altered, Erased, and Reborn. So I picked these up probably a couple years ago at a bookstore for cheap. That's why I picked them up. They were cheap. And I really liked them. I mean, they're not the greatest series I've ever read, but they're pretty good. If you're looking for more like of a dystopian fantasy type thing, like this is a good read. It's a trilogy, so it's a short series, you know. It's something that's easy to get through. So it deals around these 4 boys and this 1 girl. And these boys were kept in captivity for like 5 years, and they were being tested on, and they're kind of made into like super soldiers. And this girl was in the lab. She was like a lab tech, kind of helping her father, but little does she know that she is also part of the experiment. They end up escaping altogether, and they go on little secrets and figuring out how to take down this big corporation and, you know, expose their secrets and be safe and find out what happened in their past lives. So one of the big things about this series is they have memory wipes. So their memory has been altered so much that they don't know what's real, what's fake, what happened, when did it happen, what their past life was, where are their parents, you know, they don't know any of this type of stuff. So it was quite interesting. So the first book really dealt with escaping and running away and that stuff. The second book, we find out, you know, she's part of the experiment, and we find out who's at the top of the corporation and how to take them down. And there's some betrayal in this book. And then the last one, I don't know how I felt about this. This last book really only focused on our 1 main character. It only focused on one of the boys, and it was all pretty much about him and this girl. This random girl was not mentioned in the 2 books before, so it's just this random new character, and it's just about these 2 characters pretty much. So I wasn't too hooked on this last book. I did like the character that they focused on, but it just felt like it didn't go with the rest. Like, what happened to the other characters? They're just not really in it. I don't know. Moving on, I have another favorite read. I love this series. It's The Queen of Nothing by Holly Black. Now, I don't know what this is actually, the series is actually called. Something, I don't know what the series is actually called. The Folk of the Air is what the series is called. Anyway, the first book was Cruel Prince, and then there was Wicked King, and then there's this. I loved this series. I read Cruel Prince not knowing that it was a series, and then I was just like waiting and waiting for the next one. Then Wicked King came out, and I gobbled it up, and I was waiting and waiting. And then I saw this at my library, and I didn't realize that this was the 3rd book, so I waited even longer than I thought to read this book, and it took me a second to like catch up on what happened. So I don't want to spoil anything in this book. This book is about fairies and has a lot of magic in it and some love romance and betrayal. Pretty much these human girls were living in the human world, and then one day this fairy man came, killed their parents, and kidnapped them and raised them as his own, but he's kind of rude and they don't like him, and he is crazy for power, so he wants to become king of the fairy world, but she wants to be queen and she wants to take him down, and she's in love with the prince, but like the prince, she doesn't trust him and he's a bad guy, and like, I don't know how to explain things, but this book was so great. If you haven't read the series, I highly recommend it. I loved it. I'm not huge on fantasy, but this series like swept me away, so yes. moving on, we have one that I don't necessarily love. I was in love with this cover. Like, look at that. Does that not capture your eye? I did DNF this. I didn't finish this one. I only read like 150 pages or so. It's called Moxie by Jennifer I don't know how you say that. Anyway, this is a very feminist book, and I'm not saying I'm against feminism. I am all for it, but like the way it was taken in this, I don't know. Anyway, it deals with this young girl in high school who is seeing a lot of like sexist things happening in her high school, and she finally wants to take a stand, so she writes this little newsletter called Moxie, and they have little pictures. Here's kind of what it looks like. And she has these in the girls' bathroom, and she wants the girls to band together and stand up for each other. So one of the things they protested was the school dress code, and that day they all came in and they wore bathrobes so that they knew their shoulders were hidden. It was kind of like a big FU to the school. Like, how it, I don't know. And there was a lot of references to like the Runaways and like back in the 80s and such, and her mom was like a rebel girl, a riot girl, and her mom was a huge feminist, and you know, there was a lot of references to the hardcore stuff in the 80s of like, you know, just causing protests and stuff. And I mean, I'm all for that, but like, I don't really know what the Runaways, like I've never listened to their music, and like the references to that, like there's so much reference that I'm like kind of not interested, kind of don't know what you're talking about, you know. I really wanted to like this book. Anyway, let's just move on. Next we have The One Safe Place by names I can't pronounce. I'm not good with names. Anyway, this was a pretty short book. I believe this is middle school. It's like a scholastic book. This was given to me for free, I believe. But anyway, I wasn't into this. I liked the idea for the plot. I just didn't like the way it was executed so much, I guess. So anyway, it deals around this boy who lives on a farm with his grandpa outside of town, outside of the city. And one day his grandpa dies, and he can't keep up with the farm by himself. So he goes into the city trying to find someone to help him and work on the farm with him. He gets there, and there's children on the street. People are so poor, they're begging for food. Kids have to steal for food and everything. And he meets this girl. Him and this girl like kind of partner up together, and they meet this boy who tells them about this place of where children can be safe. They have everything they could ever want. They have food, they have toys, they have a bed, you know, everything's perfect there. And they get to the place, and it's not quite what it seems. These people are doing experiments on these children, and it takes a little twisty turn, and you know, these children end up trying to figure out what's happening and how can they stop it. Next, we have Snapdragon. This is what it looks like. The art was pretty good. The story was okay, nothing spectacular. It does have diversity in this book, both race-wise, and it has LGBTQ representation in this book. Anyway, this deals with a young girl, and she meets this witch that is in town, and she learns some things from this witch and learns how to be a witch herself, and she makes a good friends, and she shows her friends some witchy things, and I don't know. She tries to use her power for good, and that's it. I don't know. I don't know what else to say about it. Next, we have Lipstick Apology by Jennifer Jabailey. I don't know. Anyway, this book is about a young girl whose parents die in an airplane crash, I think, actually. And her mom's dying words was, "I'm sorry, Emily," and she wrote it in lipstick, and they found it in the wreckage, and she doesn't know what her mom's sorry about. So she kind of goes on this mission to figure out why her mom is sorry. And she finds out some secrets that she thought maybe is better left unsaid. And so she goes through this anger with her mom, and then, you know, forgiving her mom. All the while, she is dealing with living with her very rich, famous aunt, and going to a new school, and finding a boyfriend, and stuff like that. I did like the friends in this book. I think, you know, I like the way that they were represented. Like, her one friend, Lindsay, you know, she's rich, and a lot of the times she's rich and popular, and she'll come off, like, a lot of times books will portray those characters as being, like, the mean girls, and, like, that's not how it was in this book, so I appreciated that. There was... Moving on, we have Augie and Me. It's 3 Wonder stories. Now, if you read Wonder, you'll really love this one, too. It is 3 separate stories of people in Augie's life and kind of how they viewed being around him and being his friends and their experiences with that. So the first one, I think, was the most captivating for me. It was about Julian, which in Wonder, he was the bully. He was really mean to Augie. He did a lot of unnecessary, rude things. But we do end up sympathizing for him, and, you know, he ends up learning, like, what he did was wrong, and I really appreciated that first story. The second story revolves around one of Augie's past friends, and when Augie goes to the new school, and they separate, like, they live a couple hours away now, he realizes, like, sometimes it's hard to be Augie's friend, because when you're with Augie, people stare at you, and, you know, your other friends might not understand and be mean, and you have to, like, kind of choose, like, do you stand up for Augie when he's not there, or do you kind of, like, take a step back and just let it roll over? Anyway, at the end of this book, he realizes, like, sometimes friendships are hard, but you still have to stick with your true friends. The last one I didn't like that much. It's about Charlotte, and Charlotte was one of Augie's welcome buddies in the first book, and she was supposed to be nice to Augie and show him around and stuff, but I felt like it didn't focus too much on Augie and more of her friendship with others. But nonetheless, it was a really great story, and I highly recommend this contemporary middle school book. It really pulls your heartstrings and really focuses on, you know, accepting others in a really well-written way and a great explanation, and, like, even like they have you sympathize with the bully. Like, they give you the background of everything, and I truly love this. So the last one I have to talk about is We Are All Made of Molecules by Susan Nielsen. So I really love this cover. That's why I picked it up, and it was pretty short. It deals with this boy and girl whose parents end up getting together, and they move in together. So there's stepbrother and sister, and the sister doesn't really like him. She's really angry at the world. Her parents broke up because her dad came out as being a gay man, and she's really angry at her father for pretty much lying to her entire life, is how she views it. And so she's really angry at her dad, and she's taking it out on everybody. And this boy the boy in our story is gifted, and he's very smart, but he's also not, like, he's kind of socially awkward. Like, he doesn't understand social cues. So he keeps trying to be her friends, but she doesn't want anything to do with him. Anyway, this is a book that had 2 rape scenes. I think Lipstick Apology might have had some rapey aspects. I can't remember quite, but I know this one did. And that really, like, I had to stop for a minute, stop reading, and take a step back. So if you're really sensitive to that stuff, maybe not read this book. It was a very short incident. There's 2 different incidents that's kind of rapey. But I mean, I had to take a step back. So one of the instances, she kind of ends up, like, blaming herself, which really upset me. It really angered me throughout the book. She finally gets to hang out with this popular hot dude, and this dude treats her like shit, okay? And so she goes to his house, and he ends up pinning her to the bed, and she tells him to stop a couple times, and it didn't seem like he was going to. And thankfully they get interrupted, and then he acts like it was no big deal, and she doesn't make a scene about it. He just, like, has a normal conversation with her afterwards, like he wasn't about to rape her. And then so she leaves, and she's kind of confused. She's like, well, boys get carried away sometimes. Like, that made me eye roll so hard, and I started crying. Like, how could you think like that? No, boys do not get carried away. he was being, his actions were not okay. What he was about to do was not okay. And then she starts to think like, oh, I'm sure like he was just about to hear what I was going to say. He was just about to stop, and then we got interrupted. So, you know, it's all good. And she ends up continuing to hang out with this guy. Anyway, I wanted to touch on that scene just for clarification and a warning. There is another short scene that happens at a party. Her brother ends up sticking up for her a lot throughout this book, and I really appreciate this brother. Like, he really knows, like, the right and wrong. Anyway, let's hit on the brother a little bit before I end this video. The brother is dealing with the loss of his mom. His mom had passed away. I think it might have been from cancer. And so he is dealing with the loss of his mother and trying to move in with this family and accept this new family as his own, but still remember his mom. So one of the things he has of hers is a blanket. So he likes to hide under the blanket and just breathe in her molecules. He believes like everything that a person touches, they leave behind a little part of themselves, and he likes to pretend like he's breathing her in so that he doesn't forget her. It's a really touching story about what's right and wrong, and, you know, love and loss, and the struggles of like family and friendships and sibling hatred. So, you know, they end up getting all along together in the end, and it's a really touching story. And the sister in this book, like, I hated her. Like, she was not a good person, but she didn't deserve some of the things that happened to her that were going on. And you have to have the aspect of, like, her life is falling apart. Like, she thinks her dad has lied to her for her entire life. This is a teenager, you know, she has a lot of emotions that she's trying to deal with the best that she can. And maybe she's not the best person, but she's trying to work on herself. And at the end, you know, we realize, you know, she's going to work on herself and become a better person. And that is character development. So anyway, this is all that I read this month. I hope April is just as good. I hope you liked what I had to say about them. If you have anything else to add, or you want to tell me about the books that you read this month, feel free to leave them in the comments, and have a wonderful day. Bye!